We are going to talk about matching sides and angles. Now, this is really important when we start to talk about congruent and similar triangles. We'll get to that in another lesson, but this idea of being able to identify matching or corresponding sides and angles. So I've drawn a quadrilateral here, and you can see by the way that it's labeled, I have some information about it. Okay, I can see that each of these symbols represent a different angle. So I can see that they're all different angles. None of those angles are the same because they've all got a different symbol. I can see by my congruence marks, or these little notch marks around the side, that the lengths of every side is different because none of them are the same. I've got 4 sides and 4 different lengths. Now, if I take that same shape and I sort of rotate it around and relabel it, W, X, Y, and Z, I've now got 2 different shapes. Now I'm going to look for some matching sides and some matching angles. The corresponding angles would be, so if I look for angle A, that's this one here. This angle A with the solid dot. So in the other shape, I'm looking for the corresponding angle. In this case, there's my solid dot. So the corresponding angle is angle Y. So angle A and angle Y are the same size, represented by that same symbol. What about B? Well, B is my double dot. So over in this one, I'm looking for the double dot, and I see it here at Z. Angle C corresponds to W, that's my open dot here, and the open dot here, and the corresponding angle to D, which is the cross, will be X. Okay, they are angles that are the same as each other. The corresponding side, or the matching sides, go like this, AD. So I'm going to go from A to D, so along this length marked 1, from solid dot to X. So over here, I look for side 1, which is this one, and I'm going from solid dot to X. So it's going to be YX, not XY, because that's going from cross to dot. But I started here, AD, went from dot to X. So I've got to look for the same thing. Dot to X gives me YX. What about DC? Well, DC is going from angle X to open dot along length 2. So I do the same. I go from X to open dot alongside 2. So that is X to W. So the corresponding or matching side would be XW. I can repeat the process. CB will correspond to, see if you can figure it out. You got it, WZ, and BA, going from double dot to single dot, would be ZY. You can see that it matters the way that they're named, the order we put them in, that you can identify matching or corresponding angles or matching or corresponding sides. Now that becomes important, like I said, when we start to talk about congruent triangles. We'll talk about what congruence means later, but for the sake of this example, trust me when I say these 2 triangles are congruent. Now that means they are exactly the same shape and size. If I cut out this one and sort of turned it around and laid it down, I'd get this one. Okay. The symbol that we use for congruence is a triple equals sign. So if you see that, it means that they are congruent. Like I said, don't worry too much about how we prove that. For the moment, I want to show you why it's important, or get used to, naming triangles. Now, if I said to you, oh yeah, this one's ABC, so that's triangle ABC, so this one is congruent, must be XYZ. That is actually wrong. And let's have a look at why that's not correct. It does matter what order you put these letters in. In this triangle, if I started at B, I'm going to take this angle here. This is the only angle that we're actually given, alpha. Right? So I know that these 2 angles are the same. I'm going to use that as my starting point. And if I went from alpha alongside 1, I'd get from B to A. So if I did my full lap of this triangle, I would say it goes triangle B, A, C. So I'm going to name that BAC. is congruent to, now what would I name the other triangle? Well, I've got to follow the same pattern. Okay, so I'm going to start at my alpha and go alongside 1. So if I'm starting at alpha, the first letter must be X, Y, Z. Okay, because in this triangle, I started at B, which is where this alpha angle is. So my congruent triangle must also start at the same place. So it's going to start with X, then I went alongside 1 and around this way. So it would be X, Y, Z. So in other words, I started at the same point and I followed the same order around. Now you might look at that and go, oh yeah, that's easy. You just went clockwise. So as long as I just do the same, that, be careful, because that doesn't also work. Right? Here is that same triangle, congruent, but it's kind of been sort of flipped on the page, flipped upside down. So it's still the same triangle. And if I went clockwise, I'd actually get it wrong. So let's have a look. Let's follow some logic. Triangle BAC. I'm starting at B, where my alpha angle is. Okay, so the first letter in this one must be also, right, if it's going to be congruent, if it's going to be XYZ, the B and the X must match. So that will be X, okay, because my starting point was B at the angle alpha over here. So I've got to do the same over here. Starting at alpha, it's going to be X. So that is the corresponding angle, I guess, the corresponding vertex or vertice to B. The next one in my naming thing is I went from B, I went from the alpha alongside 1 to get to the second letter. So let's do the same. Starting here, go alongside 1. The second letter in my name is Y, so that must be the point Y. And that only leaves me one more, Z. And you'll see we didn't go clockwise this time, we went anti-clockwise. So you have to be careful. We're looking for patterns. We started at alpha, we went alongside 1. And you need to reproduce that as you go so that the matching angles here would be angle B matches angle X. Angle A matches angle Y. That's these two here. And angle C equals angle Z. The corresponding or the matching sides, BA equals XY. And I know that because I went from alpha alongside 1 for BA. So I have to go from alpha alongside 1, gives me X to Y. Follow the same logic and I get those as my results. So it is important which order we name these in. Get used to this idea of trying to identify matching or corresponding angles and matching corresponding sides. We're going to need to use that quite a bit when we start to talk about congruence. Cheers.